Hello, friends, and welcome to this edition of the Coming In for a Landing podcast. I am your host, Paul Hudrick. And again, I am joined by another very special guest co-host. You know him from 97.5 The Fanatic. There's Sixers Insider Devon Givens. Devon, it's so good to see you, my guy.
Good to see you, man. In the middle of the pandemic, we can't see a lot of our friends, but it's great that we can connect this way.
Yeah, man. I mean, obviously, you and I are both fixtures at every Sixers home game. Would always
Yep.
see each other. So definitely a different world where we're just not seeing each other. But
Yep.
here we are. And you know what? As much as that's a bummer, we got a lot, plenty for Sixers fans to be excited about right now with everything going on with the team. We can get into some of the stuff with the draft. We'll get into, how we see everything, how we see some lineups, some personnel things. Darryl Murray actually was just on 97.5 The Fanatic Monday. And I'm telling you, Devon, this dude, like, he just gets it. You know what I mean? Like, just the way. And what impresses me is the way and I've seen other people say this, and I can't possibly agree more. He has a way of relaying the information to you where you get something out of it, but he's not oversharing. You know what I mean? And I feel like a lot of GMs, a lot of personnel people really struggle with that, including some people on the other teams in the cities. But with Darryl Murray, it's just like, again, you get something out of it, but he doesn't give away too much.
Yeah, without telling specifics, Paul, he's telling you something that has you where he's pulling you in with the information. And unfortunately, like some people that used to be in the organization that can say things to pull you in, it will pull you in to kind of take you out of what he's exactly saying. You're like, what is going on here? But yeah, with Darryl Murray, he's telling you exactly what he's doing. He's being upfront. He's being honest when he's saying, look, we have a lot of work to do and we're going to do a lot of different things. But this may not be our roster at the end of the season. This may be something that we're going to do right now and we have to stand pat. However, when the trade deadline nears and you get to March and now you have to figure out what the roster is going to look like, I'm telling you the truth. We're probably going to have to make some moves. And it is refreshing to see that. And you do want to see that from the other teams in the city as well. But now having been through so many years of Philadelphia 76ers basketball, so many things that have been presented to you differently from a lot of different folks, it is great to hear that from Darryl Murray straight from the start.
Right. And the way I've described it and the way I think of it, it's almost like he views a roster almost like a living organism. Like It's not final. Like this is like a just a precursor. And there's going to be other things on the road. They still have a roster spot that they can still use. I mean, it depends on some other things, how they break out. If they give Isaiah Joe their first second-round pick, if they give him a standard contract, which seems likely to hear him tell it, if they give Paul Reed a standard contract, or if they put him on a two-way, because they still have that other two-way spot open. So at minimum, there is one roster spot that is going to be open, whether that's a minimum guy. I like, too, that, I know some people are a little bit maybe discouraged. I don't know if that's the right word, but they didn't use the taxpayer MLE, which is around $5 million. It would have been. He didn't use it. He didn't just But I kind of like the way. At first, I was kind of in that boat, but then to hear him tell it, I kind of like the idea of him looking at it like that. Like, well, I can still use it. Like, I don't have to use it right now. If a guy is a buyout candidate, maybe I could use it to lure them in. You never know what can happen between now and the trade deadline, or when rosters need to be set for the postseason. And I also kind of like the idea of, hey, we have some young players in here. We have a Tyrese Maxey in here. We still have Matisse Thybulle and Shake Milton that we're seeing how they fit into all of this. So let's let our roster play itself out and see what we got. And then at the trade deadline, then maybe we look at, hey, what are our missing pieces?
And then he doesn't have to use the entire thing. If he does use it right now with a player that he feels like, well, this guy fits for right now, but maybe he's not worth the full MLE that you're talking about, the taxpayer MLE, and they'll go that route. But right now, they do have some things that they could potentially do to still improve the roster. But as you pointed out, the question with Isaiah Joe, Paul Reed, the other second-round pick, as well as a big man, he has some options. He has some choices to make. But right now, looking at the roster, and I know we'll get into that, it's something that you feel better about right now as we sit here just 2 weeks away from the start of training camp.
Yeah, and I had John Gonzalez on in my first episode from The Ringer. John does such an excellent job, and he's such a big Sixers guy, such a big Darryl Murray guy. And the one thing that we talked about, and again, he reiterated it again, Darryl Murray, when he was on your air, he said, we have Joel Embiid and we have Ben Simmons. They are two all-stars, who are in their 20s, in their prime, how many teams would kill to be in that situation? And everyone wants to trade, like, not everyone, I shouldn't say it like that, but so many people are just like, yeah, trade Ben Simmons. Like, it's like like, no, when you have a roster like this, you try to make it work. And what you already alluded to is the idea of fit. How much better you look at opening night last year, opening night this year, how much better this roster is just going to fit. And when you, in the starting lineup, like conceivably, you might start Seth Curry and Danny Green, right? That seems to be, if the roster
it's a possibility.
That seems to be a strong possibility. It'll be those two. You think back to that versus last year with Josh Richardson and Al Horford. You could argue Josh Richardson as a more complete basketball player than either of those guys. You could argue Al Horford maybe a more complete, but fit. Those two guys hit shots, and that's what this team needs.
Yeah, and the only thing that I would think of there would be who would be your secondary ball handler. So many years now with Simmons in the lineup, the question always comes up, who's going to be the other guy handling the basketball, making things a little bit easier for Ben Simmons when he's on the floor. So those would be some of those things that Doc Rivers is going to have to figure out. Now, I do like both. I like the moves that you're talking about, and looking at the roster back in the start of the 1920 campaign, I got sucked in, and I liked what they were doing. Yeah, and listen, it wasn't necessarily wrong. It just did not work itself out. So I like what the idea was, and unfortunately, the idea wasn't executed properly with Elton Brand and Brett Brown and company, what they were deciding to do. So that's going to be an interesting thing with Doc Rivers, how they play it out, how training camp comes together for the 76ers, and who is, in fact, in that starting lineup. Shooting, and more shooting. We've been talking about this for the last couple of seasons, and already they've improved that.
Yeah, a couple of things you touched on. The secondary ball handler idea, I 100% agree. I think that's the one thing when you look at Seth Curry. Listen, he's not going to be breaking guys down off the dribble. You're not going to run ISO plays for Seth Curry. But listen, he's got a little point guard stuff in his bag. He can run a pick and roll. He can do some of those things. So I think even from that standpoint, as much as JJ Redick was a higher volume guy and he was so outstanding off of movement, a guy like Seth Curry that can maybe offer you some of that secondary ball handling, I think, is huge. And I think you make another great point when you talk about with Doc Rivers coming in here. We don't really know how he views this roster as a whole. We have no idea. So maybe he really likes the idea of putting a Matisse Thybulle in the starting lineup for his defense.
Count me in on that one.
Yeah, if that's the and I wouldn't, if that's the route you choose to go, I think in that case you almost would have to start Seth, right? You'd have to start Seth and Matisse, I would think, because then you have that. Because if you're going with just Ben as the primary ball handler, like I don't know if that works with Danny Green and Matisse then as your backcourt.
Right.
I don't know. I mean, maybe it does. To me, it might not. Matisse's shooting is obviously he's going to have to take that up to another level if he wants to earn minutes here.
Yeah.
But I'm just curious. I'm curious how Doc sees Matisse, how he sees Shake Milton, how he sees Furkan Korkmaz. And someone asked me today on Twitter, like, how many minutes do you see Tyrese Maxey getting? And it's like, you can't even answer that right now because, and I get the question. It's a fair question, but you can't answer it because you don't know how Doc Rivers sees the guys that are already here. You don't know how he's going to see Tyrese Maxey. We don't know how Tyrese Maxey is going to look from day one in training camp. Is he going to come out? Is he going to hit threes consistently? If that winds up happening, that could change everything. But I definitely want to dive more into Maxey because he's a guy. I talked on the last podcast again about, I wrote an article saying, hey, here are 8 guys I like for the Sixers in the draft. And for the record, Isaiah Joe and Paul Reed were both on that list too. But Tyrese Maxey wasn't, because I saw no path to him falling to 21. I thought he was a lottery guy, maybe just outside it at worst. I know you've watched some college basketball. You follow this draft stuff a little bit. What did you think of Tyrese Maxey coming out, and what do you think about his fit overall with the Sixers?
Well, first you look back at the history of the Kentucky basketball players coming out under John Calipari's program, and they typically succeed. And then you have this guy who is he has so much energy. He's so fiery out there on the floor, and he's fearless. And from what I've been able to watch, how he plays, he kind of reminds me. I don't know how you look at this one, and I know things are a little differently with things, but kind of like Colin Sexton from the Cleveland Cavaliers a little bit with how they work, just nonstop energy, never seem to wear out, never seem to get tired. They'll do anything, shooting a little suspect, but never afraid to take those shots. They know their limits, they know their range, they know what needs to be done. And I see him providing that energy for this team, the ability to create off the dribble. Obviously, as you just mentioned, as a secondary ball handler, maybe not in the starting lineup, but something that's going to be very important coming off the bench because we don't know where he's going to fit, as you just said, especially with this being so weird with no summer league and not having a chance to evaluate and seeing how these practices go and all that. But those things I do like. I like everything about his game and the fact that he's not one of those bigger, if you will, guards coming out. But for him to be in the range that you were talking about as a lottery selection, possibly right outside the lottery, and still being so important where many people around the NBA circles are now pointing out how he might be the steal of the draft at 21 because of the team he landed to. And it doesn't matter that it was at 21. It mattered, to your point, the fit. And he fits, we think, with what they want to do going forward. So he provides a lot on ball, off the ball, defensively, giving that effort. And also seeing him in transition is a thing of beauty as well. He is not afraid of anything. He's not afraid of the moment. And that's why I like this selection so much. And seeing him in the backcourt with Simmons, and then you have, if they do decide to go smaller on the perimeter with Curry, him, maybe Tobias Harris, Ben Simmons being out there, and another guy, Danny Green, potentially, then you're looking at something there that's just going to be fun to watch overall on the floor. The product is going to be fun, and he adds to that.
Definitely, and it's what I just to go back to like Darryl Murray when he was on the 97.5 on Monday.
Yes,
and he even said like he literally called it dumb for teams to pass. Like he didn't actually say it, but he said it. He said it was kind of dumb for teams to pass on him. If he makes one more three in Kentucky, he's over 30%. So like maybe, right. Yeah, like
the
maybe
numbers can go any way you want it to look. If you watch the games, you understand.
Exactly.
And that's what and Calipari was on the Fanatic as well. He was on the day after, I believe, the 2 days after Tyrese Maxey was selected to the 76ers. And he said, look, these other teams are going to pay for this, right? If they had an opportunity to see him, number one, to your point, one extra shot over 30%. Two, seeing him in the conference tournaments, and then three, seeing him in the NCAA tournaments, then the individual workouts, then the draft combine. If we were in a normal world, he may not have lasted where he did.
Right, and Darryl Murray said that too, and it's like you take what's there, and this guy was a top 10 player coming out of high school. He was a USA basketball guy. Like the pedigree it went to Kentucky. And with the way they play, it's also different. It's not, he's playing with two guards a lot of times with Ashton Higgins and Quickly. So it's a different dynamic as well. I want to touch on two other things you said because two interesting things. One, I actually like that Colin Sexton comp because I'll say this. I think Colin Sexton, but what are the biggest issues with Colin Sexton? His size and sometimes his defense. Maxey is 6'3" with a 6'6" wingspan. And a lot of people have complimented his defense. They think he has the potential to be a plus defender of ones and twos at the NBA level. So if you have a Colin Sexton offensively with more defense and more size, that's a pretty damn good player. So sign me up if that's what it winds up being. And Colin Sexton has turned into a decent 3-point shooter. He doesn't do it at high volume, but he'll shoot it if it's there, and he makes it a lot of times. So
we saw it. We saw it with our own eyes against the 76ers.
Play. Yep.
Right.
So I mean, I that's a pretty good comp to me. I hadn't thought about it, but I liked it that way. I think like when I see Roll, and maybe not an apples to apples game wise, but as a combo guard, I should say, that can guard ones and twos, that can possibly do it at an elite level, that can maybe shoot a little bit, that can score a little bit. I kind of see a little bit of Drew Holiday, and that's what he compared himself to that as well.
I like it. Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, Drew's a borderline, he was an all-star, but he's a borderline perennial all-star in this league. So if he gets to that level, then that's an unbelievable steal for the Sixers. But I can see that. I could see him becoming that kind of player. And then the other thing you talked about, and you've heard Doc Rivers talk about it, you've heard Daryl Murray talk about it, is that they want to be up-tempo and they want to be fast-paced. That's one of the things that they want to do. And Brett Brown want to do that too, but maybe they didn't do it as often as they'd like. And I think what I like about the roster and the way it shapes up, even though you could certainly argue that they don't really have a true point guard on the roster. When you look at Ben Simmons, Shake Milton, Maxey, like Curry, they have guys that more combo-y guys more so, or hybrid guys more so than flat out traditional point guards. But what I like about the roster is that optionality that you can put Ben Simmons at a 5 and then go 4 shooters, go Tobias, Danny Green, and then maybe even like Seth Curry and Maxey and something like that, and just run and gun it. I love that idea. Or even like Tony Bradley's a guy who's a little bit more athletic as a 5, so maybe you can put some lineups where you have him as a 5 and you can run up and down a little bit more. I think they will ultimately envision Paul Reed as being that kind of guy. Probably not this year because he's got some edges he's going to have to smooth out. But I think he could potentially maybe be that guy down the road. But yeah, that's the biggest thing I love is that optionality in the roster. But do you think, if in your opinion, would you like them to bring in another guy who could be a traditional point guard? I know the name that I've seen thrown around a lot, and a guy I wouldn't mind here would be Shabazz Napier, a guy who can literally he can dribble and he can shoot and he can run an offense. So would you be interested in them bringing in a guy like that, or do you think it's better to do what Morey's doing and just kind of maybe leave that roster spot open, see how things play out in training camp, and then maybe you make a move?
Yeah, I do believe that they still would need to add another ball handler in the event that something like that did happen where Simmons maybe got in some foul trouble. Yes, Shake Milton has done it. We've seen him do it. But would you like more of a pure guy? Now, in today's NBA, there are rosters where you typically do not have certain guys out there who you would call a point guard. Look, as much as Patrick Beverley, a lot of people like him around the league. Yes, he's a point guard and he protects the basketball. He doesn't turn the ball over at a high rate. Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, Lou Williams are handling the basketball. Reggie Jackson at that time as well, after the acquisition of him to the Clippers roster, handling the basketball. So it doesn't have to be a pure guy. I would like to see another. And there were names that have already gone off the board that have signed in other places that I did like and did think that they would jump in 100%. I even, for me, who was not a ball handler, but another shooter, in Bryn Forbes, who also went to Milwaukee. I like Bryn Forbes as well. So I do think that they could stand to add another point guard, if you will. And listen, Raul Neto was there. Now he's in Washington. Just meaning that you have it there should you need to go to it. He's not going to be your primary. He's going to be one of your guards. And in the event that you need somebody to really run a set, run the offense, and you can trust them, that's a name that I believe that they should go out there and maybe take a peek at. I've also heard maybe Reggie Jackson, since he was, in fact, with Doc Rivers, and maybe also a local product in Langston Galloway, who's more of a combo like Reggie Jackson, but just another guard. And if you're doing that just to do it, then I don't think you need to, unless you're adding specifics when it comes to a point guard.
Right. Like if they were to go into game 1 with this roster, I think they'd be fine. Like I think they, I guess I wouldn't hate it because of the idea of, well, let's get a look at Shake Milton and see if he's improved and see if maybe we can rely on him more for some 1 minutes. Let's see how it looks with Seth Curry playing the 1 next to Ben Simmons.
Right.
Let's see how it looks with Maxey playing the 1. Like, let's kind of take a look and then get a feel for it. And then maybe, either a buyout guy, or maybe there's a trade to be made. Because look, here's the other thing that I think, some people have mentioned it, but maybe we're not talking about enough, is tradable contracts. They have many of them. When you look at Mike Scott, when you look at Terrence Ferguson, they have guys that the contracts will help them make a deal down the road. If you're kind of big, maybe not necessarily big game hunting, but like decent game hunting, Danny Green's contract would even
1 year, $15 million.
Exactly. That would be really attractive to another team if maybe, and I think when we look at, it's always come down to Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid. It's always going to come down to Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid, no matter what we do, no matter what the roster looks like. So I like that Darryl Murray has done everything he can to maximize. I would say this though, and you can tell me your thoughts on it if you agree with this way of thinking. It seems like Darryl Murray is good with what they have, and his thought is this: hey, if Joel Embiid goes up another level, if Ben Simmons goes up another level, then maybe at the trade deadline I'll look at something a little bigger. If it looks like maybe we're kind of in a similar boat to last year, where getting to the second round would be good, then
Yeah.
maybe you just look at like a margin piece. Would you agree with that assessment? Do you think I don't want to say they're not trying to win a championship this year, but I think that this year is more about building Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons back up, building their confidence back up, and building around them, and kind of seeing where it goes.
Yeah, because it's always been about them. Even when we evaluated things in the past with a different regime, we would say it's all about how, yes, you can go out and acquire Al Horford, Josh Richardson, and all of these different names. You can bring back Tobias Harris. But at the end of the day, it's going to come back to Embiid and Simmons and how they've improved over the offseason. Have they grown as players to come back and give you that, where you're talking about bringing in another body, the lower value, if you will, and impactful, yes, because you bring them in for a reason. But if those two come back and take that very next step to superstardom, then that equals that player that we're talking about quite possibly in the long run. So yes, and that's how they should approach it. It's a weird one. It's a 72-game season. You're going to be able to evaluate things very quickly, and maybe they've convinced them. Look, Darryl, let's go with Shake Milton in the beginning. We've seen it. He's dropped 40 on the Clippers. Doc, you saw it. He did that to you, right? So, let's see what he has. Let's figure that part out. Let's see if Isaiah Joe can make the squad and contribute and give you 7 to 9 minutes during the regular season. Maybe that boosts up a little bit, and he disappears in the postseason because we know how it goes. But yeah, I think they would be perfectly fine with how things are at the moment, especially with the way some of the numbers that we've seen out there being thrown around and players getting the contracts that they've gotten. I think they're perfectly fine as is with what they have because of, to your point, and what Maury has said, and constantly, he consistently has said this, Doc Rivers as well, the 2 stars. The 2 stars is what they are all about. Can those improvements happen with Ben Simmons and his offensive game? Can the improvements happen with Joel Embiid, his conditioning, and the love, if you will, of the game every single night out and being available? That will make up for a lot of stuff. Then that goes along with your bench depth, how Tobias Harris fits again in the Doc Rivers offense. And then the fact that you have a head coach that might result in a couple of wins as well because of the moves that he makes in game that you may not have made in the past.
The coaching staff as a whole, really, because I think with all due respect to the previous regime, like, this is a hell of a coaching staff.
Big time.
I'm a big Dave Yeager guy.
That was my choice for the head coach.
Mine too. I really would have liked him to. Listen, that was before Doc Rivers became available.
Exactly.
Too, so I'll say that. If you can get Doc Rivers and then have him on the side, you have Dan Burke. This Sam Cassell. It's a phenomenal coaching staff. So you have to be excited by that. And you're right. That could add a win or two at some point down the road. You can't really quantify that as of now, but how they could both help. How that staff could help Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons is going to be huge. And you make an excellent point with Doc Rivers. Tobias Harris, that was the best stretch of his entire career, was playing under Doc Rivers and playing with Sam Cassell. Like, that's the best stretch of his career. So can he, it's a little bit different here because of the roster, but maybe they can replicate some of that to get his confidence up and maybe get him to near that level. Because the Sixers don't need him to be an all-star. They just need him to be a third guy, a complementary scoring piece they need out of him. They don't need him to be an all-star. So how do you see, we talked about the roster, and let's just assume that for the most part, this is it. This is what we're looking at. How do you see the starting 5? And then I guess who would be, if let's say Doc goes with 9 guys out of the gate, how do you see that all playing out?
Yeah, so of course, Harris, Simmons, and Embiid are your 3 mainstays, and they're going to be in the starting lineup. And then I do add Matisse Thybulle to that mix on the wing. I think if he can take that step from what we saw, obviously, his rookie season, then the extended rookie season inside the bubble with the playoffs, and now coming back and being respectable from outside at the 3-point line, not afraid to put the ball on the floor, less turnovers, then I think we could see a pathway where he is now in that starting 5. Then there's just the option of, is it Seth Curry, to your point, is that extra ball handler, or is it Danny Green because of the veteran leadership? And with that goes into the 9 and trying to figure out, okay, the punch off the bench. Is Tyrese Maxey in there? Because Shake Milton is probably going to be in there. Do you want to bring 2 smaller guards off? You're probably going to have to anyway, whether it's Curry and Maxey or Milton and Curry and Milton and whatever combination they decide to go with, 2 of those 3 are going to be coming off the bench, and that leaves Danny Green. Is Danny Green more valuable to you in the starting lineup or coming off the bench? Either way, you need some extra shooting on the floor. So one of those 2 additions, the new additions in Curry and Green, are going to be in the starting 5 with them. If I had to lean, I would probably go with the shooting, to your point, of Seth Curry, because of the luxury of Shake Milton and Tyrese Maxey coming off the bench, and bring Danny Green in that mix with them, because now you're saying, once again, the extra ball handling, the fact that if he is a little bit exposed defensively, Curry, I'm fine, because I do have Simmons, Embiid, and Thibault. And Tobias Harris, when he digs in, he's not a bad defender, so he takes pride in what he does out there defensively. So you're only really weak at one position at that point. So that's where I would go with the 5. And I've already mentioned Shake Milton. You're going to have to tell me why he's not in that rotation overall. Wow. 9. So we're looking at 7 right there. So you're looking at Shake and Danny Green. Dwight Howard is going to be in the mix. That's 8. And if I'm looking at a 9th right now, if Mike Scott, no, here's one that we didn't mention as a possible free agent. I'm bringing back Glenn Robinson III.
I wouldn't hate that. I really
You're probably going to get him on a lower number. He knows what you do, right? He knows the players. This is a different system, but he knows the players. And you're adding another wing. So that's probably where I would go. If you're not going specific with Napier at the point guard spot, if you're not looking for another, or if you cannot locate another stretch big out there to go, since you have more traditionals, Embiid, Howard, and Tony Bradley at the 5, and Simmons even not being a shooter right now. If you want a shooter, that's the wing. Yes, Mike Scott is still on the team, but I would probably look at Glenn Robinson III.
I would be open to that. I've seen some people say that, oh, well, how disappointed he was with his role here, but it's like, that was Brett Brown. This is Doc Rivers. This is brand new. Like, if he were to come back, it's not going to be the same. So
can we break some news right now?
Why? What's up?
Did you just see? It just popped up. It's minor, but it's another stretch shooter that we've been talking about, Ryan Broekhoff, who did sign with the 76ers, according to Adrian Wojnarowski, has just agreed to terms with the 76ers to come back and play for them. If people don't remember, he joined the team inside the bubble, had to opt out. We don't know why. We never really got a full understanding of what it was. Many believed it was something, at least with family, because he did talk about, being careful with COVID and his family and his wife. His wife was
had an autoimmune issue.
Yes. So he had to be careful with that.
I believe she actually did test positive. And that's why he decided to skip. Which, obviously can't blame him for that. Clearly.
So that was the roster spot we just talked about.
There we go. So that probably does it. So basically, the first half hour we talked about nothing. No, but hey, you're right. Another guy that can just flat out shoot the basketball. That's what they need. They need shooter. So it's interesting with Broekhoff, because I suspected that was more of a Brett Brown connection because of the Australia connection. So I assumed that, but I guess he's still got Ben Simmons there. So, I mean, it's still, there's still an Australia connection there, and Brand did bring him in. So, but that's another intriguing guy. I mean, I probably would say he's on the outside of the rotation looking in.
I agree.
To earn it. I think Maxey's got to be in the rotation right off the bat. I look at it. So if I'm going starting 5, I'm probably looking at it as the 3 guys, Ben, Joel, Tobias, and then I probably go Danny Green and Seth Curry just to round that out. That's probably what I do. And then when I look at that bench unit, it's intriguing because then I can bring in Shake. I mean, to your point, maybe it is better to put Matisse in the starting lineup. Then maybe you bring Danny Green off the bench so you get a little more experience coming in with Maxey and Milton. And that kind of maybe evens that out a little bit. And you go with Dwight Howard and maybe just with Ben and just run and gun it. But and
remember, Joel used to come off right around that 7-6 minute mark.
Yep.
So he comes off, where do things go there? And so how do you want to do it? Who's going to be playing on that second unit with Ben Simmons and Tobias Harris leading the way.
Yeah, that's the other, like, I'm just so curious.
And we're only going off of what we knew. So,
right. We have
Doc
no
Rivers
idea.
might do things differently, but that's how it would normally go. So to how you're laying out your starting lineup now, I don't know, but I don't know that there's really a wrong answer right now.
No, I don't think there is either, and I think a lot's going to play out in what's going to be a really weird training camp and what's going to be a really weird preseason even.
Yeah, for sure.
We don't even know where they're playing, what they're doing. That's still all up in the air.
Just all we know is 3 games. That's it.
So, and the 3 games, I guess they played 5 in the past. So, I mean, that's
5 to 7.
Yeah, it's going to be less, games. And that's going to complicate things. So, but if you're a Sixers fan, you should be excited. There's a lot to be excited about. I think, again, roster optionality and all the different lineups that Doc Rivers is going to be able to tinker with. We know Darryl Murray, like I said earlier, I feel like his roster, it's a living organism. It's going to keep changing, and he's going to tinker, and he's going to mess with the edges as much as he can to try to gain advantages. And depending on where they're at the trade deadline, depending on who's available, you might see something. So I'm really intrigued. But Devon, I want to thank you so much for coming on, man. I really appreciate it. And hopefully we'll see more of you down the road. Keep doing your thing on 97.5. I know we're all listening in, and appreciate you coming on so much, man.
No, thank you, man. Appreciate you having me. I love what you're doing, and good luck with everything with the podcast. You just reach out, and I'm there.
I appreciate you, man. I want to thank all of you guys so much for checking the podcast out. Again, episode 2, for coming in for a landing. Again, please rate, comment. We're on YouTube. I'm working on Apple. We're still figuring that one out. I'm still getting approval from Apple, but I know I'm on Spotify. Spotify's a big one, and I'm on Stitcher as well. So please check it out when you can. Again, rate, subscribe. Please feedback on Twitter if you have any questions, if you have any comments.